The gentle murmur of voices and the occasional clink of glasses filled the air of a charming cafe in a quiet corner of the city. The warm glow of hanging lights bathed the room, giving it a cozy yet elegant vibe. Clara Hayes adjusted her thrifted cardigan and took a steadying breath. She wasn't used to places like this, but her roommate Sophie had insisted this blind date was exactly what she needed. Clutching her purse tightly, Clara walked in, scanning the room for the green scarf Sophie had mentioned. Her eyes landed on a man sitting by the window, a green scarf casually draped over his chair. His neatly combed hair and focused expression as he scrolled through his phone gave him an air of sophistication. That must be him, she thought. Summoning her courage, she approached the table with a tentative smile. "Hi, you must be Ian. I'm Clara. Nice to meet you." Ethan Carter, deep in thought over an email, looked up abruptly. He blinked at her, confused but intrigued. Hi?" Clara mistook his hesitation for nerves and slid into the seat opposite him. "I get it. Blind dates are awkward, right? Sophie told me you might be a little shy, so don't worry. I can talk enough for both of us." Ethan opened his mouth to explain the mix-up but hesitated. Her enthusiasm and genuine demeanor were refreshing. Most of his encounters were with people who seemed to be performing some sort of script, but this woman, she was real. He decided to play along for a moment, curiosity getting the better of him. "Yeah, blind dates are definitely different," he said, a small smile forming. Clara laughed nervously. "Exactly. Sophie's been pestering me for weeks to give this a shot. I finally caved. How about you? Is this your first blind date?" Ethan leaned back, considering his response. "Let's just say it's not my usual thing." Clara smiled warmly. "Same here. So, what do you do for work?" "I dabble in consulting," Ethan replied vaguely. Clara tilted her head. "Consulting? That sounds fancy. I'm a barista, so it's not exactly glamorous. But hey, coffee keeps the world running, right?" Ethan chuckled, genuinely amused. "Absolutely. A noble profession." They continued chatting, and Ethan found himself laughing at Clara's stories about customers, her attempts at painting, and her dream of traveling to small art towns across Europe. She had a spark that he hadn't encountered in a long time, and he didn't want the conversation to end. Suddenly, Clara's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and froze. "Hey, Clara. I'm here at a cafe, wearing a green scarf, table by the counter. Looking forward to meeting you. Ian." Her cheeks flushed as the realization hit her. She looked up at Ethan, her voice trembling. "You're not Ian, are you?" Ethan shook his head, an apologetic look in his eyes. "No, I'm not." Mortified, Clara grabbed her bag and stood abruptly. "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. This is beyond embarrassing. I have to go." "Wait," Ethan said, standing as well. "Clara, it's okay. But she was already halfway out the door, her face burning with shame. Ethan watched her leave, a strange pang of regret settling in his chest. He'd let her go, but he wasn't sure why the idea of never seeing her again bothered him so much. That night, Clara slumped onto her couch, groaning into a throw pillow. Sophie looked up from her laptop, smirking. "That bad?" "Worse," Clara mumbled, recounting the mishap in excruciating detail. "I can never show my face in that cafe again." Sophie snorted. "Sounds like a meet-cute gone wrong. What about the real Ian?" "I didn't even see him. I was too busy fleeing the scene of my disaster," Clara said, shaking her head. "And the guy I talked to? He was nice. But it doesn't matter. I made a fool of myself." Meanwhile, Ethan sat in his apartment, staring at the untouched book on his coffee table. He kept thinking about Clara, her candid laugh, her unfiltered honesty. For the first time in years, he'd felt like he wasn't wearing a mask. The next morning, after debating with himself, he reached for his phone. "Hi, Clara. It's Ethan, the guy at the wrong table." I know it was a mix-up, but I really enjoyed talking with you. Would you be open to grabbing coffee again? Across town, Clara read the message, her heart skipping a beat. Sophie, ever the romantic, practically jumped up and down when Clara showed her the text. Well, what are you waiting for? Sophie urged. Text him back. After a moment of hesitation, Clara typed, sure. Coffee sounds great. When they met again, it was at a small, quiet park cafe, Ethan's suggestion. This time, there were no mix-ups, no misunderstandings. They talked about everything from books to travel dreams, the conversation flowing as effortlessly as it had before. I have to admit, Clara said, smiling shyly, I didn't expect to see you again. Neither did I, Ethan replied, his gaze steady. But I couldn't let a good thing slip away. And for the first time in a long while, they both felt like they'd found something worth holding on to. As the afternoon sun dipped lower, Ethan found himself drawn deeper into Clara's stories. She spoke about her mother, whose medical bills kept her juggling 2 jobs, and her sketches, which she dreamed of one day turning into a career. Each word painted a vivid picture of her resilience and determination. You're amazing, Ethan said, the admiration in his voice unmistakable. Clara laughed lightly, brushing off the compliment. Amazing or just stubborn? It's a fine line. Later that evening, back at his office, Ethan leaned against the wide windows overlooking the city skyline. Claire, his ever-efficient assistant, entered, her arms crossed as she gave him a knowing look. You've been distracted all day, she said. Let me guess. It's about her. Ethan sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Yeah, it's Clara. Claire raised an eyebrow. And you're still not telling her who you are? Not yet, Ethan admitted, his voice quiet. I don't want her to see me through the lens of my name or bank account. I want her to know me for who I really am. Claire softened slightly, but still looked skeptical. You know you can't keep this up forever. If she finds out and it doesn't come from you, it's going to hurt a lot worse. I know, Ethan said, exhaling deeply. But not yet. A couple of days later, Clara met Ethan at a quiet cafe tucked away from the busy streets. She spotted him sitting at a corner table, dressed casually in a soft sweater and jeans, his usual sharp appearance replaced with something far more relaxed. Hi, Clara said, sliding into the seat across from him. Hi, Ethan replied, his smile warm. I wasn't sure I'd come, she admitted, fidgeting slightly. But curiosity got the better of me. Ethan chuckled. I'll take it. Their conversation flowed easily, and Clara felt her nerves fade as they exchanged stories. She spoke about her passion for drawing, her dream of opening a community art studio, and the countless odd jobs she worked to make ends meet. You're so passionate about it, Ethan observed, leaning in. It's all I've ever wanted, Clara said, a wistful smile on her face. You'll get there, Ethan said, his voice steady and full of conviction. Clara blinked, his words catching her off guard. You sound so sure. I am, Ethan said simply. As the weeks passed, their bond deepened. Ethan visited Clara's favorite park, where she often went to sketch. He watched her bring scenes to life in her notebook. The wind brushing through the trees, a child chasing a butterfly, or an elderly couple sharing a quiet moment on a bench. One afternoon, Ethan accompanied her to the local market to pick up groceries. Clara teased him as he struggled with the unwieldy shopping bags. City guy not used to manual labor, she joked. I think I'm managing just fine. Ethan replied with mock seriousness, hefting a bag of apples. When they reached her small apartment, Clara welcomed him inside. It was modest, but the walls were alive with her sketches, some taped haphazardly, others carefully framed. The space radiated warmth and creativity. This is home, she said with a smile, motioning for Ethan to set the bags on the kitchen counter. Ethan looked around, his admiration growing. Her life wasn't extravagant, but it was full of meaning. Her art, her dreams, and her unwavering drive. One evening, Clara invited Ethan to a local art gallery opening. She beamed as she walked through the exhibits, her excitement palpable. "This piece," she said, stopping in front of a vivid painting of a father and daughter fishing at a lake, "reminds me of my dad. He used to take me fishing when I was little." Ethan noticed the way her voice wavered, her eyes glistening with emotion. "He must have been very proud of you," he said softly. Clara turned to him, her expression raw but grateful. "Thank you," she whispered. They left the gallery together, their connection deepening with every shared moment. But as their relationship grew, so did Ethan's guilt. One night, while sitting in his office, he found himself staring at his phone. He wanted to tell Clara the truth about who he was, but the fear of losing her held him back. Across town, Clara stumbled upon a news article while scrolling through her phone. The headline read, "Ethan Rivers, tech visionary and philanthropist, expands his reach." Her eyes widened as she saw the accompanying photo. The man in the article looked uncannily familiar. Too familiar. Her heart pounded as realization set in. Ethan wasn't who he seemed to be. He wasn't just some down-to-earth guy who worked in tech. He was one of the city's most prominent tech entrepreneurs. The next time Clara saw Ethan, it was at a charity event where she had volunteered to help coordinate auction items. She was busy arranging a table when a hush fell over the room. She turned to see Ethan entering, his presence commanding attention. Her stomach churned as she watched him greet the event's host. When the host announced, "Please welcome our esteemed guest, Ethan Rivers," the crowd erupted into applause. Clara's hands tightened around the clipboard she was holding, her mind racing. She waited until the crowd thinned before approaching him. "Ethan," she called softly. He turned, his expression shifting the moment he saw her. "Clara," he began, but the words faltered as he saw the hurt in her eyes. "You lied to me," she said, her voice trembling. "You're not just some guy in tech, are you?" Ethan's shoulders sagged, and he took a step closer. "Clara, I can explain." She held up a hand, stopping him. "Don't. I trusted you, Ethan, and now I don't even know who you are." Before he could say another word, Clara turned and walked away, leaving him standing there, regret etched across his face. "Clara," Ethan began, stepping toward her. "We need to talk," Clara said, her voice steady but tinged with disappointment. Ethan nodded, leading her to a quiet corner of the art gallery's lobby. Clara crossed her arms, her sharp gaze locking on him. "So, you're Ethan Rivers, the tech mogul? Care to explain why you pretended to be just another guy?" Ethan exhaled deeply, running a hand through his hair. "I didn't set out to lie. When we first met, it was a misunderstanding. You thought I was someone else. But I liked it. For once, someone wasn't talking to me because of my money or status. You just saw me." Clara's jaw tightened. "And instead of correcting me, you decided to run with it? Let me believe in someone who doesn't even exist." "No," Ethan said quickly. "The things I told you, the time we spent together, it was all real. I just didn't know how to tell you the truth without losing you." "You mean without ruining the fantasy?" Clara shot back, her voice rising slightly. "Do you have any idea how humiliating this feels? I trusted you. I thought you were different." "I am different," Ethan insisted, his voice tinged with desperation. "Clara, you're the only person who's ever seen me for who I really am, not what I own. I didn't want to lose that." Clara's eyes filled with unshed tears, but she blinked them back. "You already have." Ethan's shoulders slumped as she turned and walked away, her steps quick and determined. His hand twitched as if to reach for her, but he let it fall. There was nothing he could say to fix what was broken. That night, Clara sat in her room, staring at her sketchbook. Her pencil hovered over the page, but no inspiration came. Her mind was a storm of emotions, betrayal, sadness, anger. A soft knock on her door broke her reverie. It was Sophie, her roommate, peeking in cautiously. "Hey, you okay?" Sophie asked gently. Clara shook her head, a tear slipping down her cheek. "Not really." Sophie sat beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulder. "Want to talk about it?" Clara hesitated, then whispered, I don't know if I was falling for him, or for the version of him I thought I knew. Sophie hugged her tighter. Whatever it was, you deserve someone who's honest with you. Don't settle for less. As Clara lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, she resolved to focus on herself. Ethan Rivers might have seemed perfect, but his deception was too much to forgive. Ethan sat in his apartment, the city lights twinkling beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. Usually, they brought him comfort. Tonight, they felt cold and distant. Clara's words echoed in his mind. You already have. The weight of his mistake pressed on his chest. For the first time in years, he felt truly lost. I need to make this right, he muttered aloud. His assistant, Claire, entered the room with her usual brisk energy. You've been brooding for hours. What's going on? It's Clara, Ethan said, rubbing his temples. He explained the situation, his voice heavy with regret. Claire listened, then crossed her arms. If she's as special as you say, you need to show her. No more words, actions. Grand gestures only work if they're heartfelt. Ethan nodded, a spark of determination returning to his eyes. You're right. I need to show her how much she means to me. The next day, Ethan knocked on Clara's apartment door. To his surprise, Sophie answered, eyeing him with suspicion. You've got some nerve showing up here, she said, crossing her arms. I need your help, Ethan said earnestly. Please? Sophie sighed. 5 minutes. Start talking. Ethan explained his plan to fill Clara's favorite gallery with her artwork. I want her to see how much I believe in her. Weeks later, Sophie led Clara to the gallery. The sign outside read, Special Exhibit, The Art of Clara Hayes. Inside, her work was beautifully displayed. On a pedestal was a note. Your art deserves to be seen by the world, just as you deserve honesty and love. Let me try again, Ethan. Tears filled Clara's eyes as Ethan stepped forward. I know I broke your trust, he said, but you mean everything to me? Clara hesitated, then smiled faintly. Let's see where it goes. For the first time in weeks, Ethan felt hope. They could begin again.